An ongoing debate in Massachusetts over marijuana legalization. The voters said yes. Lawmakers keep saying slow down. So here's a brief recap of where things stand now. On Election Day, voters signed off on a law that made it legal for people 21 and older to have and use marijuana and marijuana products such as edibles, up to 10 ounces in their homes and 1 ounce outside their homes. It also allowed people to grow up to 6 marijuana plants per person in their houses, up to 12 in a single house, and let people share small amounts with others as long as no payment was exchanged. Retail sales were supposed to be subject to the state sales tax and an extra excise tax of 3.75%. And since that vote, a handful of state lawmakers postponed retail sales by an additional 6 months to the middle of 2018. And earlier this month, State Senator Jason Lewis filed 14 bills that would tighten other regulations. These include, but are not limited to, limiting marijuana plants to 6 per household, down from 12, allowing just 2 ounces of marijuana per household, down from 10, delaying retail sales by at least 2 years. Other proposals include banning infused products altogether, possibility of suspending a driver's license if someone refuses a field sobriety test, and giving cities and towns more power to reject marijuana establishments without a vote by residents of that city or town, but rather by the elected officials. Other lawmakers have suggested raising the legal age of 25 and raising the tax level on marijuana sales. Senator Jason Lewis joins me now. Good to see you, Senator.
Good to see you, Jim.
Will Luzier. Will was the campaign manager for Yes on 4, the campaign to tax and regulate marijuana. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Senator, obviously you have the power to amend it. It's a law. It's not a constitutional amendment. Do you think the amendments that I just described are consistent with the will of the voters as expressed on November 8th?
I do. They, obviously, the voters voted on November 8th to make it legal to possess and use and to purchase and sell marijuana, and to home grow it as well. And we have every intention in the legislature to implement the will of the voters. As of December 15th, as you pointed out, it's already legal to possess and use and home grow limited quantities of marijuana. Nothing we've done will change that. But what we need to do now is implement a legal marijuana market in Massachusetts, and that's a major, major undertaking, and we need to do that right.
Let me just pick one item from that list, which you don't, obviously you don't think it violates the spirit. Under one of the proposals that you filed, instead of the citizenry of a city or town voting to reject or not reject an establishment, a marijuana establishment, the elected officials could do that. Can you imagine if you proposed a comparable thing, for example, like lifting the cap on 2.5? There'd be a revolution. You wouldn't have the courage to do that. So why is it okay here to take away the popular vote and not in other circumstances?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to understand that in all other jurisdictions, cities and towns and counties opt in to allowing commercial marijuana establishments. And remember, they can't do anything to ban the use of marijuana or even homegrown.
Right.
This is all about just marijuana shops and growers.
But you're taking away the right of the people to vote.
What we're doing
that is true, correct?
Well, what we're doing, no, because what we're doing is saying that this should be treated, whether there's marijuana retailers or growers or how many there are, should be treated like any other ordinance or bylaw.
But it is taking away the right of the people to vote, which is what they just adopted.
The town meeting, and a town would vote on it. Those are the representatives of the town in the town meeting.
But if not elected
or the
officials
city council in the city, right?
And
that's consistent with how we do other ordinances.
We had Charlie Baker, the governor, on the radio. I asked him about this today on Boston Public Radio. I want you to hear, Will, a little bit of what he had to say.
There's no question that the will of the people needs to be honored and represented. And some of the stuff you just talked about, I think, would probably fall outside that category, and some of the stuff you just talked about, you could probably argue would be inside it. But almost everybody who's involved in this in the legislature has said to me that they have pretty regular conversations with the folks in the healthcare community and the law enforcement community and the local community who have an interest in this. But they also say they have conversations with the people who were part of the question and part of getting it passed.
They have conversations with you, and if they did you object to these things?
Did I talk to the governor? Did I talk
No, you talked to the Senator Lewis or any of the people proposing
I did not
change?
talk. I did not talk
not?
to Senator Lewis before he filed any of his bills.
So
no.
I want to get back
we
to...
talked very, very early on before the senator even went to Colorado. But that was the only time we had a
that was even before the
discussion.
thing was that was voted on.
That's right.
But let me just say, you acknowledge you have no choice. It's a law. Any law can be amended. So the issue here is whether or not they're going too far. The issue is not whether they can do something to what the voters passed. Of course they can, right?
Absolutely.
Would you acknowledge that some changes are appropriate?
You know, I think that the Cannabis Control Commission should have the ability to regulate, and then if there's a problem with it after that, then the legislature should step in. But and there are certainly issues like impaired driving and other issues that are absolutely within the purview of the legislature to deal with. Okay. And I think they should deal with that.
So, I assume from what the governor said, you had to. Why would you not consult when the leaders of this question, they got 1.8 million people to vote with them, won? Why would you not talk to them? You're not bound by them and say, here's what I'm contemplating doing. How do you feel about this? Well, maybe I won't. Why would you not consult with the leaders
absolutely.
of the question? But you didn't before you filed it.
Well, the bills, 5,000 bills were filed, Jim, as you know, at the
but
beginning
on
of the legislative session.
But 5,000 bills don't relate to questions passed by the voters, Senator.
Legislators filed their bills. There's about 75 bills in total filed that address marijuana in this session. And as we move forward in the process, the new marijuana committee that the Senate President and the Speaker are putting together will have multiple public hearings. I hope to have those all around the state. I've certainly, my door's open. I'll meet with anybody, including marijuana activists who worked on Question 4, including business interests, including law enforcement. That's up to the Senate President to decide, who will serve on the committee.
The rumors are that he is. Are you comfortable with that?
No.
Why not?
Because we shouldn't have someone who was an opponent leading that committee. We should have someone who's an agnostic leading that committee. So someone who wasn't a proponent, someone who was not an opponent, but someone who was who didn't take a position.
I know it's difficult for you to say it, but you were the lead opponent. There's no question about that. Is it fair that the lead opponent, who was unhappy with what the voters said and they rejected your position, should be the person leading the charge here, Senator?
Again, the decision on who will serve on this committee, just like any committee, is up to the Senate President. I mean, what I would say is I have dedicated almost 2 years of my life to researching and working on marijuana. I led a special Senate committee last session. I went to Colorado. I've interviewed more than 75 different experts on this. And overall, I think, my position is sometimes mischaracterized, Jim. I'm not an opponent of legalization. I'm an opponent of what I would characterize as commercialization.
You, in fact, told me at the Kennedy Institute that you could have drafted a law in advance to legalize it you would have voted for. So why don't you just do it and we wouldn't have this whole mess?
Well, we didn't. We did the work last session. We've spent a lot of time understanding this. The bills that I filed, which also include a bill that would expunge convictions, a bill that would make it ensure that we are energy efficient and efficient water use, a bill that would ensure we have a research and data collection program.
Which everybody agrees with.
So there's a lot of things here that we've put on the table. And
I got to hold you there. What was your response?
Here's the two things that I worry about, Jim. The first is that the committee has to be fair and transparent, or else the voting populace is going to lose confidence in their elected leaders.
And I certainly agree with that.
And the second thing that I'm concerned about is that the elected leaders think that they know better than the people who voted for this initiative.
Well, the people voted for the elected leaders, whether they supported the ballot question or not. They were elected by the people.
But now the elected leaders think that they know better than the people who voted for it what's good for the people.
Senator Lewis, on a related note, the thing I
certainly don't think I know better.
Medical
than
marijuana
people,
was approved more than 4 years ago. The implementation is an insult to the voters. There was a requirement that there be at least one dispensary, maximum I think of 35, one in each county. 4 years later, I think at least half the counties don't even have one. Why doesn't Beacon Hill worry about implementing that from 4 years ago that deals with people's health rather than worrying about amending a ballot question that just got almost 2 million votes?
I agree with you. I think we screwed that up. And I think that's a cautionary tale in terms of doing things wrong. I think that's exactly what we need to make sure doesn't happen with recreational marijuana, which, by the way, is 10 times more complicated than medical.
15 seconds.
That's why
Could
we
you
need
sit
to get
down
this
with
right.
him and agree on a bunch of amendments, I don't mean this minute, that would be mutually acceptable instead of having yet another fight?
There are 2 or 3 amendments that the Senator has filed that, we think have some merit. We certainly have to.
Let's try it and we'll have you back. Senator, it's good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks
so much.
for your
Appreciate
time.
it.
Appreciate both of you gentlemen.